This is an Eyewitness News special presentation. Violence rising, making our city safe.
We will not surrender our city to the violent few. We will never stop fighting to protect New Yorkers.
The pain and the sorrow are deep. So too are the fear and the dread and the anger.
Michelle Go's murder was a wake-up call. We're mad as hell, and we're not going to take it anymore.
The city is on edge after a series of high-profile crimes, from a deadly subway push to 4 police officers shot in just 3 days.
It's terrible. I mean, the city has gotten worse, you know.
Scared. I mean, I got a baby on the way. You got puppies shaking. Like, nobody wants to live under these circumstances.
So how did we get here? And more importantly, how do we get New York back to being the safest big city in America?
We must save this city together.
Good evening again. I'm Sandra Bookman.
And I'm Bill Ritter. There's no question that crime is up. There's no question that these horrific high-profile tragedies need to stop. And there's no question that this fear of crime is real and growing.
But there are many questions about how to regain control of our streets, our subways, and our city. And the answer's not easy. Over the next half hour, we are going to examine what could be behind this recent spike in violence, from homelessness and mental health to illegal guns and bail reform.
But perhaps more importantly, we're also looking for solutions, like how neighborhood groups can help fight crime and which reforms need to be reformed again. We'll also provide practical information like how to stay safe and vigilant on the subway, including where to sit and where to stand.
Our coverage begins now with Eyewitness News reporter NJ Burkett.
Whether it's a residential street in the Bronx or a subway station in Midtown Manhattan, New Yorkers feel more vulnerable tonight than they have in years.
It's just a very sad situation, what's going on in New York City. I hope New York City gets better.
Violent crime has been rising over the past 2 years, with crazed, unstable people in the subways and fearless teenagers with guns. Shootings that once took place in back alleys now happen on crowded streets in the middle of the afternoon. Gang members blasting at one another, with bystanders caught in the crossfire. Among the latest victims, an infant struck in the face with a stray bullet. Police officers are being shot, and unsuspecting subway riders are being attacked at random. Others are being robbed. In the past 2 months, it's become an onslaught.
Certainly the levels of safety that we saw during the last 10 years are now being reversed, and it's a serious moment. No one should undermine how serious this is.
There were 485 murders in New York City in 2021, the highest total in 10 years. There were more than 1,500 shootings, the highest in 15 years, and double the number just 2 years ago. And underground, major felonies are surging. Bronx DA Darcel Clark.
It's not just the law. You know, it's people thinking that they can get away with whatever they want. That's where we are now, which is, you know, really scary. Just a total disrespect for humanity.
The age at which somebody first picks up a gun is getting younger and younger and younger. We now have 12 and 13-year-olds picking up guns and carrying. We really better focus on that.
Aborn believes Mayor Adams understands the crisis, but needs to act quickly.
I think he has a very short window to put a cap on the rise in crime. I think it will come down, but it's going to come down gradually.
Aborn is convinced that targeted anti-gun patrols can be done legally, and that federal agents have a role to play.
We need to set up true interstate strike forces to go after the illegal guns coming up what we call the iron pipeline, from Pennsylvania, the Carolinas, Texas, Alabama, and Georgia, and Virginia. The feds could help us do that tomorrow morning.
Darcel Clark is convinced that coordinated investigations will help turn the tide.
We're putting together investigations that are phenomenal. And once we get them now, it's going to be able to stick because every agency is working together.
And no, experts say this is not the 1970s all over again. You heard Mr. Aborn say a moment ago that the mayor has a relatively short window. He says a few months to try to stop the trend, but driving down crime in New York City, he says, will likely take the better part of a year. Tonight in Harlem, NJ Burkett, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
And it's so complicated as well. Interesting story. NJ, thank you so much. Why are people worried? Well, listen to this. 4 police officers shot in 1 week. An 11-year-old hit with a stray bullet in the face. And when a fast food worker is murdered after handing over all the money in the cash register, well, people have reason to worry about the city's future, and by comparing it to the past.
Now, the truth of the matter is that New York is much safer than it was in the crime-ridden 1970s and 80s. Yes, there is a disturbing spike in violence and high-profile violence, but it is a far cry from the bad old days.
So we crunched the numbers for you. There were 488 murders last year in the city of New York. That is down significantly from the record for a single year. 2,262 back in 1990. During the 80s, the city averaged 1,681 murders every year. And in the 70s, the average number of annual homicides, 1,556.
Listen to what a police officer told us back in 1981 when we were reporting on a similar spike in crime.
There's definitely a lot more guns on the street, and that's probably it. The gun laws, the courts, the way they're letting people out, it's just like that all the time. It's going to be a lot more killings, too.
Sound familiar? Yes, it is quite literally a decades-old debate and conundrum. How to keep guns off these streets.
Investigative reporter Dan Crowth takes a look at exactly where the guns are coming from and what can be done to stop them from getting into the hands of killers.
This is the gun used to kill and critically injure the officers Friday night. A Glock with a high-capacity magazine, reported stolen in Maryland 5 years ago.
We don't make guns here. How are we removing thousands of guns off the street and they still find their way into New York City?
We found a majority of guns used to commit crimes in New York over the past 5 years have come from out of state, especially the South. Most from states with less restrictive gun laws, shown here in dark blue. States like Georgia, Virginia, and South Carolina.
Is the iron pipeline.
Darren Porcher is a former NYPD lieutenant.
What do we do to stop the illegal weapons from coming into New York? We can't stop every car that goes over the bridge.
We want to marry into a relationship with ATF, and we'll have police officers from the NYPD work in these investigative task force with the ATF.
He says local police can't travel out of state to get guns. They need the feds to do that. The mayor told me he has discussed the problem with the president.
We need to close those loopholes, and we have not. And that's the help we need from the federal government.
Gun arrests have gone up by a lot in New York City since 2018, by 52%. But at the same time, fewer people have been charged with gun crimes. As you can see here on the top line, as the number of stop and frisk searches went down since 2014, so has the number of felony and misdemeanor gun crimes, which you can see on the lines below.
Of course, you're going to have less charges against individuals that are in possession of firearms. I don't think that there should be an eradication of stop and frisk. I just think it should be used as a poignant tool. It needs to be more specific.
They also say federal legislation is needed to help get weapons off the streets nationwide. Not just assault rifles, but handguns.
We don't hear of the handgun. Because the handgun is the one that shows up in our neighborhoods every week.
The mayor today said he's pushing for spot checks at tunnels, bus, and train stations for illegal weapons, for prosecutors to press gun charges faster, and to increase gun trafficking penalties. Dan Crowth, Channel 7. Eyewitness News.
Meanwhile, Mayor Adams calling on district attorneys in New York City to crack down on violent criminals. One of the DAs who has gotten criticism during this crime surge for his push to focus on rehabilitation and try to look at cutting crime in a more holistic way is Alvin Bragg, on the job as Manhattan DA since January 1st. I talked to him late this afternoon about his take on what this city is going through.
Well, we're in an urgent crisis moment about guns. I've been talking about guns for the last 2 years and been living with guns and gun violence my entire life and worked on it throughout my career. So I speak of this not as a new issue, but with one with renewed urgency given where we are in our city, and are definitely going to give primacy, as I've said for the last couple of years that I would, to gun trafficking, gun violence, as we go forth and address public safety in our city. That's my number one job as Manhattan District Attorney, and that's what I'll be doing.
You ran, Mr. District Attorney, for office and won on a reform platform. And it was basically, how do we get people out of jail? How do we rehab them? How do we bring all these social service agencies together to fight crime and get people from being incarcerated to becoming productive citizens in society? And it was noble. There were those who questioned that, and there are those who now were critical of it and who see that perhaps you're now backpedaling a little bit. How have you changed that? Are you backpedaling? And what do you think of that proposal now that you ran on?
I ran on a gun message. I mean, I talked about having a gun pointed at me 3 times growing up. I talked about having a homicide victim on my doorstep. I talked about having this semi-automatic weapon to my head and gave primacy to guns throughout the campaign. So this is not new to me. And as a career prosecutor, I've prosecuted those who possess guns. I've prosecuted those who rob stores with guns. I've done work on gun trafficking. So this is not new. And in fact, it goes and is inextricably linked with the point you're talking about fairness. One of the reasons not to be focusing on so-called kind of low-level matters or getting people addiction treatment for things is so that we can have the bandwidth and focus more resources on the drivers of crime. We need to be focused like a laser on those who are doing absolute harm and danger to our communities. That's what I ran on. I ran on getting services to those who are, driven by, addiction or other issues who are not doing harm in this way. People who are using guns and wielding guns, I've been unequivocal about that.
Fascinating look at how we are all going to work to solve this problem. As we continue on this Eyewitness News special presentation, it's not just up to police and politicians. We're going to take a look at how community groups and you can play a role in keeping your neighborhood safe. Plus this.
It's an unfortunate reality. The subways have become very dangerous. I spoke with a former SWAT officer about what you should be doing in the subway to keep yourself safe, including where you should stand when a train comes in. All of that information coming up. Eyewitness News.
And everyone believes that the gang and crime crisis is the NYPD's problem. No, it is not. Every agency in this city must be involved with the #1 threat in our city, and that's violence.
And Mayor Eric Adams making it clear this afternoon that it's all hands on deck when it comes to fighting crime, from police to community groups to individual New Yorkers. Eyewitness News reporter Kimberly Richardson spent the day with anti-violence advocates in the Bronx and continues our coverage.
Violence definitely is not going to get you anywhere, except, God forbid, in a slammer or a grave.
They may not themselves be a victim of a crime, but at any given time they could be.
Precisely what drives Marisol Rivera to do what she does.
Save these kids, save these babies. That's what it's about at the end of the day. It ain't about us.
Each and every day in some of the most dangerous neighborhoods here in the Bronx.
You can't tell a young person to put a gun down and don't replace that with a job, with a trade, with something that they're interested in.
Marisol is what's called a violence interrupter or credible messenger.
3 stabbings happen here, 2 shootings happen here.
Part of the team at Save Our Streets, an anti-gun violence organization under the city's crisis management system. They fan out to hotspots, talk, listen, provide alternatives and support to those tempted to take the wrong path. The group's motto, stop shooting and start living.
I'm not ashamed to say I've been through trauma. I've been through a mother who couldn't support me, who was on drugs, similar to the story they have. So, they can't say, oh, you don't understand, you don't know what I'm going through. I understand, I've been there. And I'm letting you know you can still come out of this good and alive.
This initiative started in 2014, but Mayor Eric Adams vows to reinvigorate the effort with what he calls a holistic approach to dealing with violence. Bronx Borough President Vanessa L. Gibson.
You have crews, young people that are fighting each other over blocks and spaces. And so the CMS organizations that are on the ground understand that. And we just need to give them the support they need so they can expand, build capacity, hire more staff, and really serve a larger community.
There are many layers. SOS sends teams to hospitals, schools, precincts, and has ties with ACS. Marisol tells me she considers violence a disease. Her work, the antidote.
I just love to see the young kids just do better. Come to me, oh, I'm working, I'm going to school, thank y'all. You thought I wasn't listening, but we heard you. It took time, but we want to do the right things.
Both consider this a call to action and attention.
We can change the dynamics of this city and the Bronx right now. In January, we cannot wait.
Kimberly Richardson, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
It is indeed a patchwork quilt of solutions. Coming up next, we ride the rails with a security expert. telling you what you should do to keep from becoming a target. We'll be right back. Continue our coverage now. We want to talk about subway crime. The hard truth is the majority of New Yorkers are probably more worried about being attacked on the subway than being shot on the street. Stats show that murders, rapes, and felony assaults are all up year to year in the subways. And high-profile cases like Michelle Go last week being pushed onto the track have made people nervous about riding the rails. Today, former NYPD Commissioner Bill Bratton, a one-time transit cop himself, penning an editorial in the Daily News of New York about how to keep subways safe. Among the things he wrote, we're quoting now, simply put, if you stop, summons, and arrest the people who are jumping the turnstiles, crime will go down. And joining us now, former commissioner of the New York Police Department, two separate times, Bill Bratton. Bill, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Bill, great to be with you. Bill, echoing your initial comment that back in 1990, when I took over as chief of the transit police, there were 2,200 murders in the street. There were 22 murders in the subway. But people polled by the media indicated that they thought that 50 to 60% of the crime that was being reported was in the subways. And that's because so many New Yorkers depend on the subway system. Similarly today, fear of crime in the subway probably does exceed fear of crime on the streets. That's the reality. Right. And the reality is the crime growth in the subways is going up faster than it is on the streets.
And it's not just the lifestyle part of it and our safety, but if you don't get people, if they're scared to ride the subways, we're not going to rebuild this economy because people don't want to do it. There's less than 50% sometimes on the daily averages of riders who are on the subway. How did you do it? Take us back to 1990 and 1991.
Quite easily. The New York turnaround began in the subways in 1990 when we went after fare evasion. 180,000 people a day out of 3.5 million riders not paying their fare. We started putting teams together to stop them, to arrest them, to cite them. 1 out of every 7 was found to be wanted on warrants. 1 out of every 20 was found to be carrying a weapon coming into the subway. So it became known that if you were going to try to evade the fare coming in the subway, you stood a very good chance to be arrested. If you didn't show up in court, I had arrest teams who would go out 3 o'clock in the morning and bang on your door and arrest you at home. So you couldn't escape from what we were doing. We turned crime around in the subways, and because of that, Giuliani hired me as Commissioner 94, and we turned crime around in the streets. So that by 2018, New York was the safest it's ever been. With 6 million riders a day on the subway in 2018, we were reporting fewer than 6 crimes a day. Think of that, 1 for every million riders. And then our legislature changed the rules, bail reform, criminal justice reform. Yep. It totally raised 25 years of success.
I'm going to ask you something that we get about less than 30 seconds for you to answer, if you would. Lots of proposals. Mayor Adams today, you heard him talk about all the things he wants to do. Former cop, so he thinks like a cop sometimes. What has this done to you? What do you feel after having 2 runs as commissioner, crime lower, now it's raising again? What has it done to you personally?
It basically, it's disappointed me. It's disgusted me because it didn't have to be. Thank you, politicians. But thankfully, Eric's blueprint that he announced today, an extraordinary document after only 3 weeks in office. It has all the right elements. The secret now is to try and make them all work. But it's an extraordinarily well-crafted plan. I applaud it.
Okay, former Commissioner Bill Bratton, the NYPD. Thank you for your service, sir, and thank you for joining us on Eyewitness News today.
Thank you, Bill.
All right.
All the best.
Best to you.
You heard the former commissioner discussing subway safety and the ways police can bring crime down, but you too can take some steps to stay safe. Kristen Thorne takes a look at the simple ways you can avoid becoming a target.
Retired New Jersey ESU and SWAT team officer Cesar Oliveria knows all about personal safety. He joined us in the 179th Street subway station in Jamaica to go over all the things riders should be doing to keep themselves safe while standing on a platform to minimize the risk of being pushed into an oncoming train.
And when you enter your environment, clearly you have to observe it, right?
Oliveria says as you wait, look at the people around you. Your head should be on a swivel, as they say.
Don't have a false sense of security either. Just because we're in this space where there's not many people, somebody may just be coming down.
Do not be on your phone. If your eyes are on your phone, they aren't on what's happening around you. You are a perfect target.
Isn't it just a good thing to do to just put it away? Just put the phone
100%.
away?
100%.
Look.
100%.
You know that yellow line? It's yellow for a reason. Never, ever wait on it.
So please step back and step away.
One of the safest areas you can stand on a platform is with your back up against a pillar or a wall. And that's because it allows you to see this entire area around you, but protects the area behind you.
If you don't have that option, as the train comes in, stand in the middle of the platform. And Oliveria, who teaches martial arts, says adjust the way you stand there. This may be a comfortable position, but
if I get pushed from the back, I'm easily going to go forward because there's no base. But if my body is like this, right? Okay. And I'm standing, I'm strong this way and I'm strong this way.
And since we're all in this together, look out for other riders. Say something if you see someone too close to the tracks.
You're too close to that. You're too close. Right. So just back up a little bit.
In Jamaica, Kristen Thorne, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Thank you for watching our special about trying to stop the violence.
Yes, there is fear and shock and worries, from safety to its impact on the vibrancy that makes New York City the biggest in the country. We hope we offered some solutions about that and put a bright light on the dangerous surge we're seeing.
Because after all, we are all in this together. Again, thanks for joining us.